Welcome, everybody. We're here for another session of our Practitioner Spotlight. And this week we have Eric Ferguson. And Eric has been around for years in the MAT program also. He's started out, he got a specialist certification in around 2002, he says. And then got the master level at around 2005. And then he was in the first RH class in 2015. He's been an instructor for us, starting with the Jumpstart program since 2008. So not only as a student and a practitioner of MAT, Eric's been a big part of the MAT education program. And again, since 2008, he started teaching Jumpstart classes. Again, he's another individual that I know real well, personal relationships, and it's been great to have him a part of MAT and just a part of the community and getting to know him over the years. So welcome, Eric. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat for a little while.
All right. So first off, I mean, Eric, if you can just kind of go through kind of where you started, like what got you to MAT and what were you doing prior to MAT? What association did you have that kind of interested you in trying to learn the technique and kind of what got you involved and what it's done for your career at that point?
Yeah. Well, in hindsight, to use the word career literally, I didn't really have a career. I actually had a job. So it's really MAT is what's really given me a career. But at the time, when I first started out, I was at the Cooper Clinic in Dallas. Great organization, have an institute on site where they do biomechanical research, and we were doing post physical therapy work and functional training and corrective exercise. We were doing all these things, which of course was some of the things that I learned in college as well with my degree in exercise science, kinesiology. So that was great because it backed all that kind of stuff up. So I was hearing it over and over with the doctors that were there on site and the other specialists. So that was fine. I loved it. However, I felt like there was something missing. Those were tools that I was using, and I felt like the more I used those tools, I felt like there was still something missing. I felt like maybe when I started asking the correct questions, it actually opened up even more questions than I even had to begin with. Working with clients, doing all these different modalities, I felt like it was kind of like looking at a stock quote. When you look at it for only a day, when you look at it for only a week, you may see that you're up 5 or 10%. But if you really look at it over a year, you're down 30%. Then what's the point? What are we even doing on a daily basis? Mm-hmm. And we had the luxury to be working with clients over years and years. And when you look at it over time, things weren't necessarily improving the way I thought things should improve. I felt like we were playing whack-a-mole. If clients came in and we were doing stretching or foam rolling or corrective exercise, it didn't seem to have a lot of staying power. And it seemed like we were just trying to even later on kind of do whack-a-mole. Whatever we were helping in one situation, we found that, maybe that it was kind of problems were coming up in other areas. And I wasn't happy with that. And the clients seemed to be okay with it because they get some temporary relief, but I wasn't okay with it. And that's when I started asking some very different questions and heard about MAT back in, gosh, this was 1998.
I have to interrupt you for 1 second. Can you define whack-a-mole?
Define whack-a-mole?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shows my age again. Yeah. The game from the 80s.
Yeah.
But I heard about MAT back in, I think 1998, something like that. Again, I'm bad with dates. But around 1998, I heard about one of the, I think maybe even one of the articles you have hanging in your office about your work with Elway and Stockton all in the same year or two. And I heard about that. And then we had some continuing education in Dallas, and another incredibly intelligent gentleman, Tom Purvis, came in and I heard about MAT from Tom as well. So when I heard about it from two different sources, I thought, okay, I think these are some of the things that are answering the questions that have been burning inside me with my clients that I was concerned with.
And you know that article about John Stockton and John Elway was that there could have been 2 rings in the same year. And with the Broncos, my first year with the Broncos going to the Super Bowl, and then with the Utah Jazz in the NBA championship. And just
St. Jordan.
Neat to be involved with that. Yeah. I know he ruined it 2 years in a row.
Right.
But, yeah, and so I mean that's a neat story. I mean the same thing. I mean you see people go to the gym. I mean day after day, week after week, year after year, and it's like, are they really making changes? And the positive changes, the whole reason we go to the gym. I mean, exercise is about health. And like you said, over in a short period of time, it's like you can get temporary relief. Oh, I stretch or foam roll and I feel good at the moment in time. But what is the big picture? And you see people stretch day after day after day. And over time, they never get more flexible. And so then, I mean, the definition of insanity, really doing the same thing over and over and getting the same result. And so looking for other options. And I think, I mean, I was in the same place as I created MAT, but I'd created it for selfish reasons because I was doing all those things. I was doing all the things that were designed to increase mobility. But again, every time I would stretch or get deep tissue massage, I couldn't get out of bed the next day, and with sciatica and numbness down into my big toe. And so literally asking the question due to personal experience, like, I'm not seeing changes, even though I was implementing a lot of these principles on my clients. I wasn't seeing the long-term changes myself, and things were making me feel worse. And that were supposed to be the things that were supposed to help us, and it's kind of what led to MAT. And I think so your first experience with working with the principles of MAT, I mean, obviously we're talking about the idea that tightness was more of a symptom. And being exposed to MAT and looking at the idea that it's this neuromuscular weakness, how did that change your thought process and what you were doing on a day-to-day basis with your clients?
Well, I mean, it was groundbreaking, so at least my initial motivation was really kind of striving for something excellent for my clients. So, and that's kind of how I try to run our business, is kind of the client first and relationship first and giving first. So in a weird way, I was seeking something excellent for my clients to help them achieve better results with the, rehab kind of stuff that we were doing, the post-rehab stuff we were doing. And then the sports performance things we were doing with our pro athletes, I thought something could be better. So when I started, so the kind of a funny side story, my first experience with it wasn't with me personally. I didn't even have my first session myself until after I already pulled the trigger and started coming up to Denver. And then I got my first session with one of the assistants in the class. But my first experience was actually with a pro tennis player here in Austin. And she fell into my lap through a connection. And she was having all these problems with serving. And I tried everything that I'd been taught in the past, the corrective exercise and functional training, and got nowhere. So I met with a colleague in Dallas that I used to work with at the Cooper Clinic, and he had been through the program the year before I did. So I got desperate, drove 3 hours to Dallas, met with him, and got this bootleg version of basically MAT Jumpstart material. And he showed me this and, said, all right, well, I guess it can't hurt. So I drove back to Austin, tried the most sketchy version of MAT probably ever. And I couldn't believe it. From that first session that we had with some, basic Jumpstart information, her problems were gone and never had an issue after that, and went on tour and was successful after that. Right. So that was the real trigger to me of like, wait a minute, this isn't really about tension. This isn't really about subjective reporting. This is about looking at things as objectively as possible. and having a system of a thought process and a checks and balance system so that we can truly find the issue and address it from a neuromuscular perspective. And it was insane. I was hooked from then on.
Yeah, and that's what's great. And for people viewing, is one of the things I always say in our courses is you don't even have to be good at MAT to have success with MAT. Like Eric's talking about, I mean, having an experience of learning it secondhand and literally being real raw in the skills at the most basic level, which was our jumpstart level. And he went and had great success with it on a high level athlete. Many times, because the principles, because the thought process is the opposite of everything else out there. Just, I mean, going with the opposite thought process already gives you a benefit of having potential results that people hadn't been experiencing. And so then you get good at it. And then all of a sudden, I mean, that can work with a high level tennis player and you can have that success. But I'm sure you've seen over the years, once you start having a reputation of maybe helping people with pain and injury and neuromuscular dysfunction, you get the worst of the worst. And now all of a sudden people walk in your door, they're non-athletic, they got autoimmune disorders, inflammatory based issues, and it's a little more complicated. And at that level, you start saying, okay, I have to be good at this. My skill level to be able to help these dysfunctional people. You have this continuum of the most dysfunctional on one end and the highest level athlete. Many times I say you can do anything wrong with athletes and still have success with athletes because the integrity of the neuromuscular system is so high. But you get these people that are chronically inflamed and systems are stressed, and there's more accountability. And so I know you work with a variety of clients on this continuum, from the healthiest to the high level athletes, to on the day-to-day side of it with some of these dysfunctional people. And what have you seen in that evolution from what you learned at the most raw level of the jumpstart training that you got versus to where you are, and then you get all the way through RX, which is an extensive education. What do you see on the implementation and how it affects the people across the board on this continuum?
Well, it's been amazing. I mean, first of all, to go back to that story, when I was working with that pro athlete, and then just months later, I'm in a class learning MAT. I quickly found out I was one of those chronic people. So I had the chronic inflammation at 25 years old. I had bilateral Achilles tendonitis and stress fractures in my tibias, and I was actually on blood pressure medication when I was 25 years old, because all these inflammatory markers kept increasing, and I just thought it was family history, like I was told. And then when I started getting MAT myself, again, it turned selfish at that point of like, wait a minute, this can actually help me too.
Right.
And then when I saw that change with MAT and saw my inflammatory markers decrease, that was incredibly powerful. And then a step beyond that of, okay, now I'm doing this exercise again and my inflammation is starting to creep back in, is where I started tinkering, and you started tinkering on me with RX. Yeah. And ever since we switched gears to RX, I haven't had any of the pre-diabetic issues anymore, and my muscular inflammation is gone. Haven't had any issues with any of those things since.
Right.
So, and my clients have seen the same thing. So when we have clients come in, we're still, of course, with our scope dealing with the neuromuscular system. Yes, of course, we're dealing with just within our blinders of dealing with the neuromuscular system, but we're seeing things from all ends of the spectrum, from pro athletes helping with sports performance to one and done situations like the tennis player and rolled ankles, all the way up to chronically inflamed clients with Crohn's disease and fibromyalgia and these kind of, we're going to call it happy side effects, to dealing with the nervous system. So it's nothing that we go in, approach and say, hey, we're going to help with this. We just go in and help with the muscular issues. And this is such a powerful system, the neuromuscular system, that has kind of a hierarchy or priority over how much inflammation is involved. It can take a reduction overall once we address it, especially with RX.
I think that's huge what you're saying there, because we don't get into that a lot with MAT. I mean, we say, stress, trauma, overuse, and the resultant inflammation is what alters the communication between the nervous system and the muscle system. And so it's inflammation that causes these neuromuscular weaknesses. And inflammation is the common denominator behind every disease out there, from coronary heart disease, diabetes, MS, Parkinson's. The common denominator with all these diseases is systemic inflammation. And so ironically, these people on one end of the continuum that are very stressed are systemically, inflamed. And it shows up through the neuromuscular system. And the tolerance levels of the muscles are very low due to the systemic inflammation throughout their body. And so the muscle tolerance levels are very low. So everyday activity can be too stressful on them. And I think it's really interesting what you said, and it correlates with everything that we believe. Is I see side effects with people, like you said, the positive side effects where, I had people with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, a woman, eczema all over her body, it was chronic, and every time she would, do any type of activity, it would come out in her system, and nobody relates these, I guess, symptoms of disease to neuromuscular dysfunction. And all of a sudden you improve neuromuscular dysfunction by getting people's muscles activated and raising their tolerance levels. And you said it perfectly, is, all of a sudden you were, pre-diabetic and blood pressure medication, everything, at 25 years old. And
Right.
then you improve muscle function and those inflammatory based symptoms go away. And early on, when I first started doing this, I had no idea, like, well, how did their digestion improve by treating muscles? And it really comes down to this idea of, you raise tolerance levels of the muscles, and the big picture idea is that the end result of an inflammatory response is growth and repair of tissue, and the tissues are able to heal. And many times you get people who are systemically inflamed. It's like they never get to that growth and repair phase of inflammation. So they're in this chronic state of inflammation, which a lot of their symptoms are just the same symptoms that you see in overtraining. From digestive issues to irritability, you can't sleep, it affects all of your mood, everything when your system's stressed. So if anybody can relate to overtraining when they were an athlete, many people live their lives that way. And so as you raise the tolerance level of the muscles, and then they can tolerate force, then they can get in the state of the growth and repair of tissue, and they get out of this catabolic state into an anabolic state, and they can heal. And then all of a sudden, symptoms related to that inflammation or related to disease start to go away, because now the body's less stressed and less inflamed, and inflammation kicks off these symptoms. And so you get rid of some of this inflammation, or resolve the inflammation, where I said the end result of an inflammatory response is the growth and repair of tissue. That's the resolution of this inflammatory response. And you get people and feed them into this resolved state of inflammation, the body can heal at all levels. We look at it from a neuromuscular system or standpoint, but again, you experienced it firsthand at 25 years old. And one of the significant things you said is a lot of your symptoms resolved, but then you started working out and exercising, and some of the symptoms started coming back. And so you started overloading and raising or exceeding your tolerance levels and stressing your system. So then you have to say, okay, what can my body tolerate? And you have to make sure that you're staying below that line, so you're not always keeping your system in a stress state. So not only do we work with muscle activation to raise the tolerance levels, but then you also have to make changes in your lifestyle to control the stresses, so you don't exceed those tolerance levels.
Right. Yeah, you've said it a million times that exercise is a double-edged sword. So that's what I love about what we do here with myself and the other 4 practitioners, MAT practitioners that we have here, is we have, our MAT based thought process that you've taught us, and then we use that with exercise. So we basically have a lab if you will, which is an exercise facility where we can test things and say, hey, is this exercise reinforcing the work that we've done on the table through MAT, or is it breaking us down? So essentially, where is it taking us on that continuum? Is it taking us toward inflammation and dysfunction, or is it taking us toward healing, repair, growth, and increasing bone density and increasing bone mass, and helping with all these other, happy side effects that we're looking for with all the exercise, and not all the negatives that people sometimes report with exercise.
Yeah, and that's one of the important or significant ideas to talk about, because exercise has been deemed as the cure-all for every disease. And exercise is a good thing. You want to exercise, but there's the catch. The catch 22 is, if exercise is too stressful, then it's having negative effects on your system rather than positive. And you get these people that hardcore, they work out every single day, day after day after day, and they never let themselves recover and heal. And then all of a sudden you say, you hear, oh, this guy, really great shape, and then he was out running and he died of a heart attack. And it's, he had a genetic disorder that, set him up for this. And it's like, well, stress, whatever you're genetically predisposed to, if your system's stressed and inflamed, it expresses those genes. And
Right.
so these rare disorders come out if your system's stressed, and genetic disorders. And so it's recognizing that exercise in the wrong environment can kill you, in the big picture.
Yeah.
And in the right environment, it can be the best thing for you. And I like how you said it earlier, is you have an objective approach, because we have a lot of ideas of what we think is good and what's right and what people should be doing. But you bring objectivity to that subjective perspective and say, you know what? I think this should be good for you, but if your body can't tolerate, we have the tools to be able to assess, to determine whether or not that had a negative effect or a positive effect. And if the forces that I put on your body had a negative effect, and your body's, reactive and stressed and very hypersensitive, then we better back off until your body proves that it can tolerate those forces. Otherwise, you get on that downward spiral, and like you said, you get all the positive effects if you stay, in a good state, which is the anabolic state, where you recover and heal. You keep pushing yourself over that threshold, and then you're in that catabolic state. And again, relatively, even if you don't think you're exercising much, relatively, people can be overtraining just through everyday activity. And all those symptoms related to overtraining do not feel good on the body.
Yeah, we have a saying here that we goof around with our clients in situations like that to sum it up with kind of a sound bite, and the table doesn't lie. So if they come in and say, hey, what did I do? What did I, is this good or bad for me? I don't know, let's put you on the table. The table doesn't lie. So when we use our testing with the objective checks and balances, we'll answer that question. But it's not based on my opinion. It's not based on your opinion. Let's see what your nervous system says about it.
Yeah. And that's what's neat about it too, is people say, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about this? Like stretching or yoga or something like that. It's not my opinion about what I think about it. It's whether or not your body can tolerate it. And if your body proves it can tolerate it, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so from an MAT perspective, you say what doesn't shut you down or what doesn't exceed your tolerance level and cause muscle inhibition will make you stronger and reinforce your strength and muscle function. But if you exceed those tolerance levels and you have muscle inhibition, then you have negative effects. And so as long as the body proves that it can tolerate a stretch or a yoga pose or a Pilates exercise, or even the muscle forces related to muscle testing and MAT, anytime we put force on the body, the question becomes, can the body tolerate that force? And if it can have a positive effect. If it can't, then it's setting up for negative responses. And so I think then one of the things that he said, you have a clinic a facility with 4 MAT practitioners. And so you went from Cooper Institute doing MAT, and maybe explain quickly kind of how you evolved and build a business. And now, like you said, this is the focus of your business. People, want to know, and it's not just an education program. Like one of the first things you said is this created a career for you. If you could just expand on that.
Yeah, of course. There's years ago, you and I would have discussions about, let's put MAT on every corner. Why is it not in every city and multiple locations in every city? And I agree. I think that's is needed and would be extremely powerful. So I think that would solve a huge problem. And then the other thing we discussed years and years ago is this, we called it the hub mentality, a hub location. So the idea was that we would have these locations instead of just individual practitioners opening up their own single shops, that maybe we have these locations in situations where if people can't get to Denver, they can't get to the headquarters for shadowing and tutoring and more hands-on accountability, and just to be around the science behind all these things, continue education on a more consistent basis. That's what the hub mentality was for, and I took that to heart. And so that's kind of what the inspiration behind my facility is here in Austin. So it started a little bit with my blessing and curse of being the only one in Texas for the first many years that I was here. So I was here as a student, and one, couldn't get treatment myself in Texas, and two, if I was practicing and I was practicing wrong, I didn't have anyone to hold me accountable for that. So I just got really good at being bad for the first few months. So I had to drive 6 hours up to Oklahoma to get treatment and to get some accountability and some tune-ups and things like that on my thought process and skills. So I wanted our facility to be something like that, where students can come if they can't get to Denver. Students can come and do shadowing and do tutoring and talk about job placement. And we do continuing education with us and our entire staff every week. And it's fun, and it's exciting, and it's holding each other accountable and iron sharpening iron. So that's the idea around the facility that we opened up, and hopefully we can open up many more.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Yeah, and I think that's probably an important factor. I mean, like you said, you've developed a career, a business, and off of, different principles, and again, reinforcing the idea that, it's needed. I always say, who's MAT for? Anyone with a muscle system, because life is going to beat us up. And from a neuromuscular standpoint, somebody has to be there to put you back together. And that's what we look at with MAT. You go out and beat yourself up, do sport activity, even if you're a weekend athlete. We think about all the aches and pains that we relate to aging. And it has to do with the failure of the muscle system to be able to tolerate forces the way it did when we were younger. But you have people say, oh, I can't do this because I have bad knees because I played football for 15 years. And life took its toll, and it starts to break us down. And the whole goal of MAT from a neuromuscular standpoint is stop that downward progression, because muscles move bones and muscles hold bones in proper alignment. And we want to stop that downward progression of neuromuscular function and start getting muscles activated, i.e. we say tighten battery cables so that muscles can do their job to stabilize joints and protect you from injury. And then all of a sudden, as you get older, you at 25, it sounds like, you're at 25, the symptoms that you talk about, blood pressure medication, you're already started, you're dying. With inflammatory based issues. And I was the same way. When I was 25, I was chronic pain, and I was borderline, high blood pressure, borderline diabetic, all of that stuff, and didn't understand it. And I was working out hard and didn't understand inflammation was the cause behind it. But I had knee pain, plantar fasciitis, SI joint dysfunction, one injury after another. So I was systemically inflamed, and it showed up through blood testing, through inflammatory markers. Back in the, this is way back in the 80s, we probably really didn't even understand that now, like we do now. Inflammation's talked about so much now, and how to control it from a dietary standpoint. But I think recognizing that we can do it from a neuromuscular standpoint, I think is huge. And like you said, now you're healthier now than you were at 25 relative to inflammatory markers and your body. So that's a huge thing, that not only did it help your career, but it helped you from a health perspective also.
Yeah, for sure. When I was 25, if they're just telling me, they're shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, it's just genetics. Well, okay. They're not wrong. there is a genetic component to it, but that's such a bleak outlook, right? Because at that point you're just going, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm kind of, how's that hopeful for my future?
Right.
So now at the age of 48, if I'm feeling better and healthier, less inflammation, and doing more physically than I was doing at 25, my genetics haven't changed.
Right. Yeah.
So if my
The
genetics haven't
expression of those
changed, of
genes,
course, the expression of those genes and the chemistry around what my body's doing with the loads that I'm putting on it is what's changed dramatically. So that's been the key to turn my health around. And we've seen hundreds and hundreds of people through our facility, and you have too, from athletes to chronically inflamed people, see the same thing, to where over time, why are we accepting this idea that we should do less and less and less as we get older and just shrug our shoulders to aging?
Right.
Why not, force the issue with our muscular system to be able to handle more and more forces so we can do more as we age than the downward spiral that most people are on.
Yeah, and that's true. And I people will hear me say that. I say if there was ever a true anti-aging program, it's MAT. And because one, from a pain perspective, you can get rid of those aches and pains that we relate to aging. You can, do things that you, couldn't do for years once you get the integrity of the neuromuscular system higher. But then in the final state, you're reducing inflammation, which is the cause or the primary factor behind these disease states. And you and I have experienced that personally. It's like, if you can be healthier at 50 than you were at 40 and 30, that's anti-aging. And there is a component of improving neuromuscular function that can reduce that. And the two of us are living proof of that. That's neat to see. And I think on the final standpoint, I know you've had success. We talk, I get more reward out of treating the people that systems are stressed and you improve their quality of life versus been involved in pro sports. I've been involved from the Utah Jazz to the Denver Broncos and other athletes, other sports. And for 30 years, I've been involved in pro sports. This was my 25th year with the Broncos, and I was 5 years with the Jazz up until then, and even overlapping those first few years. But think of all the reward excitements. I've been at 4 Super Bowls and a couple NBA championships, and man, that's all exciting at sports. But again, being able to help people on a day-to-day basis improve their quality of life, that's so rewarding. But I enjoy sports. You enjoy sports. And I just want to put out, I see your posts, and we've talked many times, and you're traveling. You got a lot of athletes that you travel to see that hire you out, and maybe just expand on what you've been doing at that professional level as a consultant with these high level athletes.
Yeah, it's to your point, it's great to see both ends of that spectrum and see. I like having my clients ask me this all the time too, which I like better, dealing with pro level athletes or dealing with the average client that I see here in Austin. And I love both. I love both for very different reasons. It is, to your point, it's exciting to help a guy increase his vertical leap 2 inches in a day. That's exciting. But it's also very exciting in a very different way to see someone who has had Crohn's disease and has lost 40 pounds and have been on medication for 2 years, all of a sudden completely change their life to where they can get out of bed, they can go exercise, they can have a wife and a marriage and kids and all these kind of things, and play sports with their kids that they weren't able to do just 2 years before they came in to see us. That's huge. That's quality of life that lasts for the rest of their life. So to see those two ends of the spectrum are amazing. And as far as my pro athletes, I'm seeing clients, and we're seeing clients here every day, but I have agreements with individual pro athletes where I fly to them, and I work with them on a regular basis to try to help their nervous system to where they don't go down the same downward spiral as their competition or in sometimes even their teammates. So especially for non-contact injuries, non-contact injuries can be minimized or maybe even eliminated if all their muscular system is taken care of. So that's a huge deal, to be on the court more often, to have your stats increase because you're on the court more. And then again, the sports performance side, when all your muscles are on, the ball goes in. When all your muscles are on,
Yeah.
you're hitting your targets more often. So the sports
Yeah.
performance is, they joke around that it's kind of like legal steroids. So we're doing all those things. So we're doing the legal steroid part with the pro athletes, and then we're doing the fountain of youth side of things here with our local clients. So it's great to see both sides.
Yeah. And that goes back to that statement I said, who's MAT for? Everybody, everyone with a muscular system, because I mean, literally life's going to beat us up. And from a neuromuscular standpoint, somebody's got to be there to put you back together. And that's our specialty. That's what we teach. I mean, I have a background in exercise science, my degree physical education with the emphasis on exercise science, and yours exercise science background. And I mean, we don't have the license to diagnose or treat pain. But our specialty, we understand the muscle system's role in chronic pain and injury. When muscles aren't tolerating forces, the passive structures take the stress from the cartilage to the ligaments and the joint surfaces. They start to take the stress. So if you can improve the neuromuscular function and the ability for those muscles to control and stabilize joints and tolerate forces, you can protect from injury. So we're muscle specialists and not rehab specialists. And that's an important part, because we don't even come from the medical background. And we don't have the license to diagnose or treat pain. But man, when you can have that type of positive impact across the board, from geriatric, pediatric, I mean, athletic, non-athletic, I mean, coordinated, uncoordinated, you can have, I mean, positive effect on anyone just by improving muscle function. It's pretty rewarding. There's a market for that. And
yeah, to say the least.
That every day. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time today. It's great talking, and good, I mean, insight for people. I mean, looking for MAT, of what it can do from an education standpoint, what it can do from a career standpoint. I mean, you're, I mean, the epitome of what we want and see with MAT is starting a career, learning the principles, you're helping people, and now you build a business off of that, being able to help people, and you have multiple MAT practitioners in your facility doing the same thing. And there's, I don't think there's anything more rewarding as a job. Like people say, you must love your job because you have the ability to help people. And I can say, yeah, that's what excites me to go to work every day. It's neat to see that you've built a business off of this, and for those same reasons.
Yeah, well, thanks to you having these ideas decades ago and teaching it to others. Yeah, it's been amazing, and I couldn't be happier. So I'm excited to be an ambassador for MAT and to help it grow any way I can. So thank you very much.
Thanks for all you do. It's good talking with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.